Jake Sullivan wiped the grease from his hands and stared at the alien device on his workbench. The small blue cube hummed softly, its surface covered in symbols that hurt his eyes to look at directly. For 3 weeks he had been trying to understand how it worked. The alien supervisors kept telling him he was doing it wrong. "Your methods are too crude," Ambassador Zektar had said yesterday, his tall gray form looming over Jake's shoulder. "Humans always try to force things apart instead of understanding them." Jake wanted to tell the alien exactly what he thought about that comment, but he needed this job. Earth's government paid him well to work at the research facility, and his family needed the money. Still, it bothered him that these aliens treated humans like children who couldn't tie their own shoes. Across the facility, Lisa Rodriguez bent over her microscope, studying samples of alien plant life. The Galactic Council had brought dozens of specimens from different worlds, claiming they wanted to help Earth scientists learn about the universe. Lisa wasn't buying it. Every time she asked to study something interesting, the aliens would shake their heads and give her something simpler instead. "This is basic material," she muttered, looking at what appeared to be alien grass. "They're treating us like we're in kindergarten." Her supervisor, a squat alien with purple skin named Vorak, heard her complaint. "Dr. Rodriguez, you must understand that human minds are not ready for advanced galactic sciences. Your species has only just discovered space travel. These samples are appropriate for your current level." Lisa bit back her response. Current level. As if humans were stupid children who needed to be spoon-fed information. She had 3 degrees in biology and had published papers that revolutionized understanding of Earth's ecosystems. But to these aliens, she might as well be a cave person playing with rocks. At the military base on the other side of the compound, Commander Alan Brooks reviewed the daily reports. The aliens had been on Earth for 6 months now, ever since humanity's first faster-than-light probe had accidentally wandered into Galactic Council space. The aliens claimed they were here to protect Earth and help humanity join the galactic community. Brooks wasn't sure he believed that story. "Sir," his aide said, entering the office with a tablet. "The energy readings from the edge of the solar system are getting stronger." Brooks frowned. For the past week, their sensors had been picking up unusual signals from beyond Pluto. When he had asked the aliens about it, they had dismissed his concerns. "Probably just cosmic radiation," Ambassador Zektar had said. "Nothing for primitive human technology to worry about." That word again. Primitive. Brooks had served in 3 wars and commanded troops in situations that would have broken most people. But to these aliens, he was just another primitive human who couldn't understand the big picture. Down in the physics lab, Dr. Helen Carter ran another test on the alien power source they had given her to study. It was incredible technology, able to generate massive amounts of clean energy from what seemed like nothing at all. But every time she asked how it worked, the aliens would smile condescendingly and tell her that human science wasn't advanced enough to understand it. Dr. Carter called her research partner Tony Chen from across the lab. "I've been monitoring their communication networks again." Helen looked around nervously. The aliens had forbidden humans from accessing their communication systems, claiming it was for security reasons. But Tony was a skilled hacker who had found ways to listen in on their conversations. "What did you find?" she whispered. Tony's face was grim. "They're not just studying us, Helen. They're actively preventing us from advancing. Every time one of our research teams gets close to a breakthrough, they intervene. They're keeping us primitive on purpose." Before Helen could respond, the lights in the lab flickered. Then the entire facility shook as if something massive had just passed overhead. Alarms began blaring throughout the compound. In the main control room, Ambassador Zektar stood frozen, his gray skin turning an even paler shade. On the main screen, dozens of massive ships had appeared at the edge of the solar system. But these weren't the sleek, elegant vessels of the Galactic Council. These ships were dark and angular, bristling with weapons that made Earth's most advanced warships look like toys. "What are those?" Commander Brooks demanded, bursting into the control room with Jake Sullivan and Lisa Rodriguez close behind. Zektar's voice shook when he answered. "The Zarathi Collective. They've found us." Jake had never heard fear in the alien's voice before. "Who are the Zerathi?" "Ancient enemies of the Council," Zektar replied, his usual arrogance completely gone. "They consume entire civilizations, absorbing their knowledge and technology. We thought they were contained in the far reaches of the galaxy." Lisa felt her blood turn cold. "You brought them here. You led them straight to Earth?" The alien ambassador turned to face the humans, and for the first time since arriving on Earth, he looked at them as equals rather than children. "We didn't know they were following our ships. The Council fleet is too far away to help. Earth's defenses are—" He paused, clearly struggling with the words. "Inadequate for this threat." Commander Brooks stepped forward. "How long do we have?" "Their advanced scouts will reach Earth's orbit within 6 hours, Zektar said. "The main fleet will arrive tomorrow." Jake Sullivan looked at the massive alien ships filling the screen. Earth's space defense network consisted of a few orbital platforms with primitive weapons. Against those monsters, humanity didn't stand a chance. Or did they? "You've been calling us primitive for months," Jake said slowly. "Maybe it's time to see what primitive humans can do when their backs are against the wall." Zektar shook his head. "You don't understand. The Zerathi have conquered hundreds of worlds. They have technology that makes Council science look primitive. What could humans possibly do against them?" Jake smiled grimly and looked at his fellow humans. Lisa's eyes were already calculating, her scientific mind racing through possibilities. Commander Brooks was mentally organizing defensive strategies. Dr. Carter was thinking about ways to weaponize the alien technology they had been studying. "We're about to find out," Jake said. The Zerathi ships moved through space like dark clouds blocking out the stars. General Patricia Kane stood in the emergency command center, watching the alien vessels approach Earth's orbit. She had been called from retirement when the crisis began, her 40 years of military experience suddenly valuable again. "How many ships are we looking at?" she asked Commander Brooks. 237 confirmed, Brooks replied, his voice tight with stress. "More are still coming through their jump points." On the other side of the room, Ambassador Zektar spoke rapidly into his communication device. His usual calm was completely gone, replaced by desperate panic. The other Council representatives were no better, some actually shaking as they watched their ancient enemies arrive. "The Council fleet can't reach us in time," Zektar announced. "They're fighting battles on 12 other worlds. We're on our own." Jake Sullivan had been working non-stop for 18 hours, trying to modify Earth's orbital defense platforms. The weapons were designed to stop asteroids and small hostile ships, not massive alien battlecruisers. But he had an idea that might work. "The aliens build everything to be perfect," he explained to Tony Chen, who was helping him rewire the weapon systems. "Their ships expect to fight other perfect ships with predictable attack patterns. What if we make our weapons completely unpredictable?" Tony grinned despite the situation. "You want to turn our defense platforms into flying bombs?" "Exactly. Instead of trying to fight them with fancy energy weapons, we load them with good old-fashioned explosives and ram them into their ships." Meanwhile, Lisa Rodriguez was working with Dr. Kevin Price to analyze the biological samples the Council had brought to Earth. If they were going to fight the Zerathi, they needed to understand their enemy. "Look at this," Kevin said, pointing to readings on his screen. "The Zerathi biology is completely dependent on their technology. They've modified themselves so much that they can't survive without their machines." Lisa studied the data. "That's their weakness. They've forgotten how to adapt naturally. But how do we use that against them?" Marie Johnson was in the pilot training center, preparing Earth's small fleet of space fighters. She had been the best pilot in the solar system before the aliens arrived, and now she was teaching other pilots how to fight in space. "Forget everything the Council taught you about space combat," she told her squadron. "Their tactics are all about elegant maneuvers and precise energy exchanges. We're going to be different. We're going to be messy, unpredictable, and absolutely crazy." The first Zerathi scout ships entered Earth's atmosphere exactly 6 hours after they appeared. They moved slowly, scanning the planet with beams of purple light. The aliens expected no resistance from the primitive human world. They were wrong. Jake's modified defense platforms activated without warning, launching themselves like missiles toward the alien scouts. The Zarathi ships tried to shoot them down with precise energy beams, but the platforms kept changing course randomly, following no pattern the alien computers could predict. The first platform smashed into a Zarathi scout ship and exploded with the force of a small nuclear weapon. The alien vessel's shields flared and failed, sending the ship spinning toward the ocean below. "Impossible," whispered one of the council observers. "Primitive kinetic weapons shouldn't penetrate Zarathi shields." "They're not primitive," General Kane said grimly. "They're just different." More Zarathi ships descended from orbit, this time ready for human tactics. But Marie Johnson's fighter squadron was waiting for them. Instead of the careful, predictable maneuvers of council pilots, the human fighters attacked in wild, chaotic patterns. Marie dove her fighter straight down at a Zarathi cruiser, firing her weapons while spinning like a drill bit. The alien ship's defensive systems couldn't lock onto her because her flight pattern made no sense. She scored direct hits on the ship's weapon ports before pulling away at the last second. "This is Eagle 1, she called over the radio. "Their computers can't handle random behavior. Be as crazy as possible." The human pilots took her advice to heart. They flew upside down backwards and in corkscrews that would have made any sane pilot sick. The Zarathi weapons designed to track logical flight paths missed shot after shot. Dr. Helen Carter had been working on weaponizing the alien technology in her lab. While the Council aliens had refused to explain how their devices worked, the crisis had made them desperate enough to share some secrets. The Zarathi use quantum processors for all their systems, she explained to her team. But quantum systems are vulnerable to certain kinds of interference. She held up a device that looked like a modified radio. "If we broadcast random electrical noise on the right frequencies, we might be able to disrupt their ship systems." 20 minutes later, Carter's electromagnetic chaos generators were active across the planet. The random signals they produced had no effect on human technology, which was designed to work through interference. But the Zarathi ships began experiencing system failures as their perfect quantum computers tried to process the meaningless noise. Above the planet, a Zarathi battlecruiser suddenly veered off course, its navigation systems confused by the random signals. It collided with another Zarathi ship, both vessels crashing into the Atlantic Ocean. Ambassador Zektar stared at the tactical display in amazement. "Your species is actually winning battles against the Zarathi collective." "Don't sound so surprised," Commander Brooks replied. "You've been calling us primitive for months. Maybe you should have asked what primitive really means." The main Zarathi fleet was arriving now, hundreds of massive ships emerging from faster-than-light travel. Their commander had received reports of the failed advance scouts and was not pleased. The humans were supposed to be helpless primitives, not effective fighters, but as the massive alien fleet moved toward Earth, they found themselves facing something no advanced civilization had ever seen before. The humans weren't trying to match alien technology with alien technology. Instead, they were using everything their enemies considered primitive and worthless. Exploding space platforms, random flight patterns, chaotic radio signals, and tactics that made no logical sense. The Zarathi had conquered 100 worlds, but they had never faced an enemy that refused to fight by the rules. Jake Sullivan watched the battle from the command center, still covered in grease and oil from his work on the defense platforms. Lisa Rodriguez stood beside him, analyzing enemy weaknesses in real time. General Kane coordinated the defense while Marie Johnson led fighter attacks that confused alien computers. "Think they're starting to realize we're not as primitive as they thought?" Jake asked. Through the windows, they could see Zarathi ships burning in Earth's atmosphere, their advanced technology defeated by human creativity and stubborn refusal to give up. The real war was just beginning. 3 months had passed since the Zarathi invasion began. Large parts of Earth were now under alien control, their dark ships hovering over major cities like storm clouds. But the aliens were learning that conquering Earth and controlling it were two very different things. Captain Rick Stone crouched behind the rubble of what used to be a shopping mall in downtown Chicago. His resistance cell had been fighting the Zarathi for weeks, using tactics that would have made his old army instructors proud. The aliens had superior technology, but they didn't understand human stubbornness. "Target is moving toward the checkpoint," whispered Ben Martinez over the radio. Ben had been a car mechanic before the invasion, but now he was a master at combining human and alien technology in ways that shouldn't work, but somehow did. Rick watched the Zarathi patrol vehicle approach. It looked like a floating metal egg, covered in sensors and weapons. The aliens inside thought they were safe behind their advanced shields and armor. They were about to learn otherwise. "Now," Rick said quietly. Ben triggered his homemade device. It was built from a toaster, some alien power cells, and a lot of human creativity. The device sent out a burst of chaotic electrical signals that confused the vehicle's quantum processors. The Zarathi craft wobbled in the air, its systems fighting to understand the meaningless noise. That's when Rick's team struck. They didn't use fancy energy weapons or alien technology. Instead, they used good old-fashioned explosives wrapped around pieces of metal. The crude bombs punched through the confused alien shields and sent the patrol vehicle crashing into the street. Across the city, Dr. Amy Walsh worked in a hidden underground laboratory. She had been studying captured Zarathi soldiers for weeks, trying to understand their biology. What she found was disturbing, but useful. The Zarathi have been modifying themselves for thousands of years, she explained to Lisa Rodriguez, who had joined the resistance after escaping from the research facility. They've replaced most of their natural organs with machines. Their brains are connected to computer networks. Lisa looked at the alien body on the examination table. "That's why they can't understand us. They think like computers, not like living creatures." "Exactly," Amy said. "And computers can be hacked." She showed Lisa a device that looked like a modified radio transmitter. "If we can get close enough to a Zarathi soldier, this will flood their brain implants with random signals. It won't kill them, but it will make them very confused." Meanwhile, Jake Sullivan had established a workshop in an abandoned subway tunnel. He was teaching other humans how to modify alien technology using human methods. The results were ugly, but effective. "The aliens build everything to be perfect," he explained to his students. "Every component is precisely designed to work with every other component, but that makes their technology fragile. If one part breaks, the whole system fails." He held up what looked like an alien weapon that had been hit with a hammer. "Human technology is different. We build things to keep working even when they're damaged. We call it being crude, but it's actually being smart." Colonel Frank Gray coordinated the resistance efforts from a command center hidden in an old mine. He had been studying Zarathi tactics for months, looking for patterns and weaknesses. What he found surprised him. "The Zarathi are perfect soldiers," he told his staff. "They follow orders exactly, use optimal tactics, and never make mistakes. That's their weakness." "How is being perfect a weakness?" asked one of his officers. "Because perfect soldiers are predictable soldiers," Frank replied. "They always do the most logical thing, but humans don't always do the logical thing. Sometimes we do something crazy that works better than logic." He pointed to a map of the city covered in red and blue markers. "The aliens expect us to defend strategic locations like bridges and power plants. Instead, we're going to attack their supply lines, rescue their prisoners, and generally make their lives miserable in ways they can't predict." Marie Johnson had been leading hit-and-run attacks on Zarathi ships for weeks. Her fighter squadron had become legendary among the human resistance, but they had also learned something important about their enemies. "The Zarathi ships all talk to each other," she explained to the other pilots. "They share information instantly through quantum communication. That makes them very coordinated, but it also means they all think the same way." She showed them a recording of their last battle. "Watch how they move. Every ship reacts the same way to the same situation. They're like a hive mind. If we can confuse one ship, we can confuse the whole group." Tony Chen had been working on exactly that problem. Using his hacking skills, he had been trying to break into the Zarathi communication network. It had taken months, but he finally found a way in. "Their quantum communication is impossible to decode," he explained to Dr. Helen Carter. "But we don't need to decode it. We just need to fill it with garbage." He activated his device, and across the city, Zarathi forces suddenly began behaving strangely. Some patrol units turned around and went back to base. Others stopped moving entirely. A few began firing at empty buildings. "You're jamming their hive mind," Helen said in amazement. "Better than that," Tony grinned. "I'm making them argue with themselves." The resistance was growing stronger every day. Ambassador Zektar, now hiding with the human forces, watched in amazement as primitive humans continued to outsmart advanced alien technology. "I don't understand," he said to General Kane. "The Zerathi have conquered hundreds of worlds. How are humans succeeding where advanced civilizations failed?" Kane smiled grimly. "Because those advanced civilizations tried to fight the Zerathi using advanced tactics and technology. We're fighting them with stubbornness, creativity, and a willingness to try things that don't make sense." As if to prove her point, an explosion echoed from across the city. Rick Stone's team had just destroyed another Zerathi installation using a bomb made from kitchen supplies and alien power cells. "The Zerathi expect logical resistance," Kane continued. "We're giving them chaos. They're programmed to handle sophisticated opponents. They don't know what to do with opponents who refuse to be sophisticated." Lisa Rodriguez joined the conversation, carrying data from her latest research. "I've been studying their behavior patterns. The Zerathi are starting to make mistakes. Real mistakes, not just system failures. They're getting frustrated." "Frustrated aliens make sloppy aliens," Jake Sullivan said, emerging from his workshop, covered in oil and alien components. "And sloppy aliens can be beaten." The war was far from over, but something had changed. The Zerathi were no longer the unstoppable force they had been when they first arrived. Humans were adapting, learning, and fighting back in ways that confused and frustrated their technologically superior enemies. In space stations throughout the galaxy, other conquered species were beginning to hear rumors of a small blue world, where primitive creatures were actually winning battles against the Zerathi collective. Some dismissed the stories as impossible. Others began to hope. The humans were teaching the galaxy a valuable lesson. Sometimes, the best way to fight perfection is with imperfection, and the most advanced weapon against logic is creativity. 6 months after the invasion began, everything changed. The scattered human resistance cells across Earth received a message that made them all stop and listen. It came from Steve Williams, a former construction worker who had become one of the most effective resistance leaders on the planet. "Today we stop hiding," his voice crackled over the radio networks. "Today we take our planet back." Steve stood in what used to be the New York subway system, now converted into a massive underground command center. Around him, hundreds of humans worked at computers, weapons, and strange devices that combined human engineering with captured alien technology. The rebellion was about to begin. Nina Davis coordinated communications from her station, sending encrypted messages to resistance cells in every major city on Earth. She had been a small-town radio operator before the invasion, but now she was the voice that connected human fighters across the globe. "All units, this is command," she broadcast. "Operation Chaos begins in 10 minutes. Remember, we don't need to win every battle. We just need to make them think we're everywhere at once." In London, Captain Sandra Lee prepared her team for their assault on the Zerathi Command Center. Sandra had been a naval officer before the aliens came, and she treated city fighting like naval warfare. Strike hard, strike fast, then disappear before the enemy could respond. "The aliens expect us to attack their strongest positions," she told her fighters. "Instead, we're going to hit their communications, their supply lines, and their computer networks. We're going to make them deaf, hungry, and confused." Paul Anderson had spent months studying Zerathi psychology, trying to understand how their minds worked. What he discovered was that the aliens had one critical weakness: they couldn't handle uncertainty. "The Zerathi need to understand everything," he explained to a group of resistance fighters. "When they encounter something they can't categorize or predict, their decision-making systems freeze up. That's when we strike." He had developed what he called psychological warfare tactics, ways to confuse and frighten the aliens using things they didn't understand. Loud human music, flashing lights in random patterns, and recordings of humans laughing or crying. Simple things that made no sense to alien logic but terrified creatures who needed everything to be orderly and predictable. The revolution began at exactly noon, Greenwich Mean Time. Across the planet, human resistance cells launched coordinated attacks that seemed random but were actually carefully planned to create maximum confusion. In Tokyo, Ben Martinez led a team that attacked a Zarathi supply depot using vehicles that shouldn't have worked. He had taken ordinary human cars and trucks and modified them with alien power sources and human weapons. The result was a fleet of vehicles that moved in ways alien computers couldn't predict and carried weapons that fired in patterns no logical system would use. The Zarathi defenders tried to stop the human vehicles, but their targeting systems couldn't lock onto targets that drove in circles, zigzags, and figure eights while shooting randomly in all directions. The alien supply depot was destroyed in minutes. In Moscow, Dr. Amy Walsh released her biological warfare agent into the city's air system. It wasn't designed to kill the Zarathi. Killing them would have been too simple. Instead, the agent interfered, with their brain implants making them see things that weren't there and hear voices that didn't exist. Zarathi soldiers began firing at shadows, running from imaginary enemies, and sending confused reports to their commanders. The alien control network filled with contradictory information, as their troops reported threats that didn't exist. Jake Sullivan had been working on his biggest project yet, a device that could turn the aliens' own perfection against them. He called it the Chaos Generator, and it was about to change the war. The Zarathi ships all worked together perfectly, he explained to General Kane as they watched his device being installed on a captured alien transport. They share information instantly and coordinate their actions flawlessly. But what happens if we feed them perfect information that's perfectly wrong? The Chaos Generator began broadcasting false data into the Zarathi communication network. The information looked completely authentic. It followed all the right protocols and contained all the right security codes, but it told the alien ships to do things that made no sense. Zarathi cruisers received orders to attack their own bases. Transport ships got navigation data that sent them flying into asteroids. Command vessels were told that their own troops were enemy infiltrators and began firing on their own forces. Marie Johnson led the aerial assault on the main Zarathi fleet in orbit. Her pilots had learned to fight in ways that confused alien targeting systems, but now they had a new advantage. The enemy ships were too busy fighting each other to pay attention to the human fighters. "This is Eagle 1, Marie called over the radio as she watched two massive Zarathi battleships firing at each other. "The aliens are doing our job for us. Press the attack while they're distracted." Tony Chen monitored the alien communication networks from his hidden bunker, watching as the Zarathi command structure fell apart. The aliens were sending increasingly desperate messages, trying to figure out why their forces were behaving so strangely. "They're starting to panic," he reported to the other resistance leaders. "Their logical minds can't process what's happening. They know something is wrong, but they can't figure out what." Colonel Frank Gray coordinated the ground assault on Zarathi-occupied cities. His tactics were based on something the aliens couldn't understand: controlled chaos. His forces attacked multiple targets simultaneously, using different methods for each assault. Some teams used stealth and precision. Others charged in with loud music and flashing lights. A few groups pretended to retreat, then ambushed the aliens, who followed them. The Zarathi couldn't adapt to human tactics because humans kept changing their tactics. "The key is unpredictability," Frank explained to his officers. "Every time the aliens think they understand our strategy, we switch to something completely different. They're fighting a war against an enemy they can't categorize." By sunset, human forces had liberated 3 major cities and destroyed dozens of Zarathi installations. But more importantly, they had proven something that shocked both humans and aliens. Earth's primitive defenders were winning. Ambassador Zektar watched the battles from the human command center, his gray skin pale with amazement. "This is impossible," he kept saying. "No species has ever defeated the Zarathi in open warfare. Your technology is centuries behind theirs." "That's exactly why we're winning," Steve Williams replied, watching reports of victories pour in from around the globe. "We're not trying to beat them with better technology. We're beating them with better thinking." Lisa Rodriguez analyzed the data from the day's battles, looking for patterns in human success. What she found surprised even her. "We're not just fighting them," she told the command team. "We're teaching them that their way of thinking has limits, and they can't handle that lesson." The revolution was spreading beyond Earth. On other worlds throughout the galaxy, conquered species had heard rumors of human success. Some were beginning to try human tactics against their Zarathi occupiers. The galaxy was learning that advanced technology had weaknesses that primitive creativity could exploit. The war was entering a new phase, and for the first time since the invasion began, humans were not just surviving, they were winning. 1 year after the invasion began, Admiral Julia Foster stood on the bridge of the first human-designed starship to leave the solar system. The ship looked nothing like the elegant alien vessels she had studied. It was rough, angular, and covered, with modifications that made alien engineers shake their heads in confusion, but it worked, and that was all that mattered. "Jump coordinates confirmed," her navigation officer reported. "Ready to assist the rebellion on Alpha Centauri." Julia smiled. Alpha Centauri was the third star system this month where conquered species had requested human help in fighting their Zarathi occupiers. The galaxy was learning that Earth's primitive tactics could work anywhere. Back on Earth, President Carlos Rivera signed the new Galactic Treaty in a ceremony that would have been impossible a year ago. Representatives from dozens of alien species sat beside human delegates, all of them equals now. The Galactic Council no longer existed. In its place was the Free Worlds Alliance, with Earth as one of its founding members. "We gather not as advanced and primitive species," Carlos said in his speech, "but as different kinds of intelligence working together." Ambassador Zektar, now wearing the insignia of the Alliance rather than the old Council, nodded his agreement. The gray alien had learned more about humanity in the past year than in all his previous centuries of life. "Your species has taught us that there are many ways to be intelligent," he said. "We were fools to think our way was the only way." In the research facilities that had once been alien-only, Jake Sullivan worked alongside scientists from 12 different worlds. His crude engineering methods were now taught in universities across the galaxy. What aliens once called primitive, they now called innovative. "The problem with perfection," he explained to a group of young alien engineers, "is that it can't adapt. When you build something perfect, you also build in its limitations. But when you build something that can be changed and improved, you build something that can grow." His latest project was a new type of starship engine that combined human engineering with alien technology. It wasn't as elegant as pure alien designs, but it was twice as reliable and could be repaired with basic tools. Most importantly, it could be modified for dozens of different purposes. Lisa Rodriguez had become the head of the Alliance's new biological research division. Her team included humans, former council species, and even some reformed Zarathi who had chosen to abandon their collective after learning about individual thinking. "The Zarathi weren't evil," she explained to her students. "They were just trapped in one way of thinking. When we showed them that other ways were possible, many of them chose to change." She pointed to a reformed Zarathi scientist working at a nearby station. The alien had removed most of its technological implants and was learning to think as an individual rather than part of a hive mind. "Intelligence isn't about how advanced your technology is. It's about how well you can adapt to new situations." Marie Johnson now commanded the Alliance's mixed-species fighter wings. Human pilots flew alongside aliens who had learned human tactics, creating squadrons that were unpredictable, creative, and devastatingly effective against any remaining Zarathi forces. "The key is diversity," she told her pilots during a training session. "Every species thinks differently, fights differently, and solves problems differently. When we work together, we're stronger than any single species could be alone." Her newest pilot was a young Zarathi who had abandoned the collective and learned to fly using human instincts rather than computer calculations. The alien was still learning to make decisions without consulting a hive mind, but it was getting better every day. Dr. Helen Carter had established the first integrated research academy where beings from dozens of species learned science together. The Academy's motto was, "Many minds, one goal," and it represented everything the galaxy had learned from humanity. "We used to think that advanced meant uniform," she said at the Academy's opening ceremony. "We thought that the best way to solve problems was to make everyone think the same way. Humans showed us that the best way to solve problems is to have many different minds working on them together." Steve Williams had returned to construction work, but now he was building cities on alien worlds where refugees from the Zarathi War could make new homes. His teams included humans, aliens, and former Zarathi, all working together using combinations of different technologies and methods. "Building is like fighting," he told his mixed species crew. "You use whatever works, and you don't worry about whether it looks perfect. What matters is that it stands up and does its job." Tony Chen ran the Alliance's new communication network, which connected thousands of worlds using a combination of human creativity and alien technology. The network was designed to be chaotic and unpredictable, making it impossible for any enemy to shut down or control. "The old networks were too organized," he explained to trainees. "They were efficient, but they were fragile. Our network looks messy, but it can survive almost any attack because it doesn't depend on any single point of control." Colonel Frank Gray had become the Alliance's chief military strategist, teaching alien commanders the value of unpredictable tactics. His academy trained officers from dozens of species in what was now called adaptive warfare. "The universe is not a logical place," he told his students. "Enemies will surprise you, equipment will fail, and plans will go wrong. The species that survives is not the one with the best technology, but the one that can adapt fastest when everything changes." The Zarathi collective was finished as a galactic threat. Some had been defeated in battle. Others had simply abandoned their collective thinking and joined the Alliance. The few remaining Zarathi forces were scattered and no longer posed a serious danger to anyone. But the real victory wasn't military. The real victory was in how the galaxy had changed. Species that had once been conquered were now free. Technologies that had been hoarded were now shared. And ways of thinking that had been dismissed as primitive were now valued as essential. Captain Rick Stone, now a general in the Alliance military, stood in his office looking at a star map that showed dozens of worlds flying the Alliance flag. Each world was different. Each species contributed something unique, and together they were stronger than any empire had ever been. "Not bad for a bunch of primitives," he said to himself, then smiled and got back to work. There were more worlds to liberate, more species to teach, and more proof to give that being different was humanity's greatest strength. The galaxy had learned that primitive and advanced were just different ways of being intelligent. And sometimes, the primitive way was exactly what the universe needed.